People Not Titles podcast is brought to you by Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results. Hello, this is People Not Titles podcast. We are with our June 10th edition. I'm with Matt Lombardi of our Market Trends podcast. Matt, it's great to have you back again.
Great day. Great to be here. Week number two.
So, Matt, we have the NAR legislative meetings wrap up. So they're meeting in Washington. A lot of buzz about it. Let's hit the highlights.
Yeah, so this is the annual meeting that takes place in Washington. We touched upon it in last week's episode. This is an annual gathering. They get about 8,000 realtors from across the country. Primary purpose is governance as well as legislative affairs, which means we got a lot of Hill visits, a lot of local realtors are meeting with their local representatives. We're going to go over some of the things that happened last week and the takeaways. But yeah, a lot of buzz. Good stuff.
So I think realtors can feel confident that they have a voice in Washington, D.C. One of the things that NAR, one of the real value propositions, which is advocacy for real estate agents.
Absolutely. They have the ears of lawmakers.
Okay.
You know, as we've touched upon, they pay a lot of money for lobbying efforts, and they do a very good job about that. So
what's at the highlights?
Yeah, so one of the highlights is NAR voted to scrap the controversial co-mingling policy. And this policy allowed MLSs to choose whether to prohibit brokers from displaying listings from MLSs alongside those of non-MLS sources, which means typically a realtor is going to put their stuff in the MLS when they get a listing, but also there's non-quote-unquote realtor sources. So this now no commingling policy sort of sets the policy straight.
Okay, so they what they're looking for with the MLS is purity of information, MLS information only. If it's not on the MLS, they don't want to have it there.
Correct.
Okay.
And approximately 29% of realtor-affiliated MLSs chose not to adopt the no commingling rule before, and this was another Department of Justice thing that they were looking at.
Okay.
So NAR is always looking for what they can do from a policy standard for members to make sure that you're not going to get sued, that there's not going to be lawsuits, that if there's any ambiguity from the Department of Justice, that they're going to try and clean that up before the S hits the fan.
Matt, is this their effort to still keep the monopoly on the MLS too?
Well, one could read it in one way or another,
Okay.
But I mean, they are controlling the MLS because the vast majority of MLSs are realtor-owned and
Yes.
or controlled.
Okay.
So yeah, their policy sort of is the magic wand that says, here is what we're going to do. But as I said, you know, a lot of MLSs chose not to do this policy to begin with. And that's the tough part when you're trying to herd cats, is you have a nationwide approach, you have MLSs in all states, and trying to get one policy that fits all is always problematic.
Especially with a group of fiery, independent, entrepreneur-oriented folks.
Well said.
Okay.
Well said. So that's number one. Number two, NAR revised its hate speech and harassment policy. And so NAR's always been at the forefront of harassment, fair housing, that sort of goes together.
Harassment in the NAR, like.
Well,
that's a different story.
That was sort of
Okay.
bucketed elsewhere.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
for the consumer side of it, we'll say
Okay.
they were on top of it.
Yes. No
So
pun
anyway,
intended.
no pun intended. So in Texas, there was a law that has now it's not moving forward, but something came forward from the Texas legislature about hate speech. And so this sort of helps rope in and define what hate speech is for realtors. And it was in direct line to this Texas proposal that is now defunct.
Matt, what came to mind when I read this is during our CLE, we had our presenters warn attorneys about their conduct online, getting into political arguments, all these kind of things. And this seems to separate your personal conduct from your professional conduct, which I think is healthy, honestly.
Correct, and 100% correct. Whereas this new policy, this speech and harassment policy, defines it as while you are on the job, not as Steve Kemp, realtor, working with Steve Kemp doing whatever you want to do
Yep.
individually,
Yep.
personally. But Steve Kemp, realtor, over here, here's your definition of what that means. So yes,
Matt, my feeling on this, you want it?
as I say almost
We're
every
dying.
week, not only do
Yeah.
I want it, but the millions of viewers and listeners want to know your perspective.
I think the person that is most successful is the person that's more holistic across all bounds. So you can't, in my view, to be an idiot personally and then try to couch yourself as a professional and not being an idiot is a hard line to cross. So I think that although this line separates it from a standpoint of liability, there is a opportunity cost to you getting into arguments, to you getting into all kinds of things. Now, of course, speak your mind, share your truth, all those kind of things. But just know when you are really hitting the line with some of your personal conduct, it will affect your professional conduct, and I think that goes without saying.
Be consistent in representing you and your brand.
Yeah, you have a brand. You have a
Right.
personal human brand, and the better you can present that brand, the better you'll do across professional and personal.
I mean, we could talk a whole episode about personal branding and representing yourself
100%.
online, but I mean, Steve brings up a great point in that you are representing yourself, whether it's for your brokerage, your real estate business, whether you're an attorney or an agent.
Yep.
But you're also representing yourself, and
Yes.
you have your own personal beliefs, and make sure that you keep it above the line.
Absolutely.
How's that?
I love it.
So this policy clarifies harassment as unwelcome behavior that creates a hostile or abusive environment affecting access to services or jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And the advocates defend the update. It protects the spirit of the policy while making it more enforceable, while the opponents to this policy say that the message that hate speech is only problematic when you're on the clock. But I agree with you, Steve, in that you're representing yourself, your business. That's where it should be defined.
Yeah, and listen, no one ever said, "Hey, I'm going to use that realtor because they're really good at hate speech."
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's going to hurt your brand if you're not properly conducting yourself.
Exactly. So this policy is now effective immediately, which means you local realtor associations out there, good luck trying to enforce it. That's one of the concerns that is out there. But these things happen all the time, so we know that this will happen.
Okay.
Any other things you want to talk about
Nope.
on that?
Nope.
So here's the good one that I always love.
Dues changed by the NAR, Matt.
So NAR's dues are unchanged.
Yes.
For next year. So you realtors out there on a national dues basis, you are still only going to pay $156 per year. Best deal out there. However, the organization, as you know, has big bills to pay because they still have to make these payments for a lawsuit that we've talked about many, many times.
Yes.
But they are on the hook for the settlement of 400 plus million. So they've made their first payment and they're going to have to make continued payments. So what is the direction for you realtors out there is dues are still going to be $156, but the $45 that you also pay for the consumer awareness, consumer advertising campaign, they can choose to take up to $35 of that to pay for this settlement if needed. So
Matt, we talk about dues being unchanged, but the application of them are changed in the sense of a broker can look at it as this and say, I'm getting less bang for my buck now because they're taking part of my money where I thought was going to go here, and now it's going there.
True. In that, right, this money is not potentially going to be used for anything but just payment, which means it's not going to be used for consumer awareness to build business and awareness amongst home buyers and sellers. It's not going to be used to build advocacy. I mean, you can go across the board of what it will not be used for, and it's just literally going to be a payment.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I found interesting in this little write-up is the actual number of realtors according to the docket, because NAR used to publish and put on their website real-time number of members, and they have struck that from the record. So this is good.
Because it's going up so fast, having a hard time keeping count?
It's actually not as bad as we thought it would be. So The actual number is 1,453,690 realtors as of today.
Wow.
However, their forecast showed that it's going to drop to 1.2 million members next year, which is not surprising.
Matt,
We've talked about that.
yeah, and anecdotally, I've been to new broker sessions all throughout Chicagoland, and the rooms are full. So whatever's happening, people are getting into the real estate business. You might have some of the current guard dropping out, but there are new people getting in, new people seeing opportunity, new people excited about it, and I think that's healthy for our industry.
Agreed. I'm not a math major, but I did some rough calculations.
Okay.
So based on the number of members and dues, NARs for dues payments, almost $227 million from member dues.
That's a big.
It's a good business to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And number two, for the national ad campaign consumer awareness, $65 million. When you add that together, almost $292 million just from you guys paying your annual NAR member dues as well as consumer awareness.
So brokers have a right to demand excellence from the NAR. And I think NAR's trying, but that's a lot of money on the table, a lot of money for them to try to keep for themselves. And I think one of the ways to keep it is to provide value to the broker.
Yep.
Okay. President Trump
Yeah.
provided a video message, Matt, at this event.
So NAR, which is a huge advocacy lobbying organization, they invite the current sitting president each year to this meeting. Most times the presidents do not go, even though sometimes they do. So over the years,
Do we know the last time that a president came?
President Trump actually spoke in his previous term.
Okay.
So I know Biden did not speak.
Okay.
And I don't know if he's ever addressed it this way. But so President Trump did not go to the event. I don't know what his schedule was like, but he did provide a 2-minute video update.
What are the highlights of these, Matt?
And he wore a blue tie.
Ooh.
Which is, I've seen it before, but usually he's in the red tie, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So he was wearing a blue tie, and I think it was for you guys out there.
Okay.
For the Realtor branding
NAR,
in blue.
Yeah, NAR blue.
But yeah, so 2-minute video that was shown during the legislative meetings. He praised realtors, saying you play a vital role in helping Americans achieve home ownership, and he called real estate his personal passion.
All right.
Makes perfect sense.
Matt, and I think that just when I read vital role, I think it was confirmed during COVID when we were declared a business of importance. So what was the word that they used?
Oh, it's yeah.
Okay.
That one.
Necessary, whatever. Vital. And so he says vital role. So I think that we found that out during COVID, that the housing market might have propped up the ailing company or country. Sorry.
Now, the majority of his 2 minutes was spent talking about the one big, beautiful bill.
Yep.
And saying how great it's going to be and wants you realtors to advocate for it because it's got some things in there that are advantageous for the real estate market, including continued small business tax deductions, protection of the SALT deductions, and 1031 like-kind exchanges, expansion of qualified business income deductions, as well as new opportunity zones for investment. So he states that the legislation will raise take-home pay for the typical family by $13,000 and boost home ownership, and called on you realtors to support the bill, promising it would help more Americans find financial freedom and a place to call home.
Matt, I've always said that more important than interest rates is going to be consumer confidence. So how consumers feel and are impacted by any changes is going to trump, if I may use the word, interest rates in the regard of people saying, I'm ready to move, I'm ready to upgrade, I'm ready to invest in my family and my lifestyle.
Yep. So that's the main wrap-up from last week's legislative meeting.
Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are brought to you by our great sponsors, Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results.
Realtors legislative meetings in Washington, D.C. They will come together again November. I don't know where it's at for their annual convention, so they'll have governance meetings, celebrities, big things happening. So
That 292 million is going to be put to good use.
exactly.
So Matt, Compass CEO lambaste the MLS in fiery keynote. Let's talk about this.
Robert Reffkin declared the debate over choice and control to be the most important moment in real estate history.
Ooh,
There
wow.
have been many important things in real estate history, and Mr. Reffkin says this is it,
Wow. What do you
which
think?
may be a little extreme,
Okay.
but that's okay. He can do whatever
Hyperbole?
he wants.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this is at a talk. I forget who he was addressing, where he was addressing, but he didn't hold back.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes aim at organized real estate, which means you, NAR, and the MLSs. Oh, this is at a national retreat in Denver.
Yeah, he's talking to his home
He's
crowd.
correct. So he's accusing MLSs, NAR, and the major real estate portals, aggregators of real estate data. He accused them of interfering with agent-client relationships and stifling innovation through rules that restrict private listing. So this goes back to their approach, which is their three-phase marketing strategy. So this is Compass. He affirmed that Compass's commitment to seller's choice, allowing listings to begin off the MLS through office exclusives. He called industry opposition to Compass's strategy the most important moment in real estate history.
So Matt, what we've seen over this course of time is this debate about PLN, the private
Yes.
listing, and we have seen that the majority of agents have agreed that clear cooperation is the way to go. And so I think what Reffkin is doing here is risky, but he has firmly planted his flag
Yep.
with one of the largest, or is it the largest? With the behemoth to say, we are going to die on this hill. Is that what he's saying?
I'm reading into it is he's making news.
Okay.
He is staying in the news.
Okay.
He is keeping this issue that's important to him and his company
Mm-hmm.
front and center.
Okay.
And will continue to be saying this, that he disagrees with this approach and our approach is the right one.
Matt, you want my take on this?
Once
Always.
again, Steve, we need it.
Okay.
Not want it,
So
need it.
what I'm feeling is here's a guy that, do you remember what Compass was supposed to be known for at the beginning?
No clue.
Technology.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to be a technology company. We're going to have better technology than everyone else. I hear this now kind of going into the distance, and now there's going to be a new thing that they're for. And so my feeling is the technology play did not land well. It did not actualize. The profit play did not actualize. And so now there's a new battle to fight, and this is his fight. Freedom for the seller, freedom for my agents.
Right.
Come here, and this is the real land of opportunity.
Right.
Don't let them restrict you. Come here to Compass for freedom.
If I was talking to a Compass agent and they said, here is our marketing approach, would you like to do that? I'm not sure I would do it.
Okay.
As
a seller.
As a seller, if they were listing my home or a residence,
yeah,
and said, Matt, here's what our approach we recommend it for, and here's the data to show that you're going to get more money when you go through our exclusive private network first, and then we'll put it in the MLS if needed. I'm not sure it's going to benefit me as the homeowner. But they are going to point differently and say it does. So this battle will continue. A couple other things that came out of this wonderful speech is that Reffkin announced a new AI rollout in July that will help Compass agents with tasks like CMAs, scheduling, and lead generation using voice or text commands. So a little technology, maybe leveraging some things out there. And he says we're investing over $100 million each year in technology. Do you think they're investing that much?
I don't know, Matt.
I don't know. It sounds good.
Whose money is it?
So anyway, he says and closes off that you Compass agents are his client and he works for you, which is true. So anyway, that's the latest thing with Mr. Reffkin, Compass, as well as the battle amongst organized real estate with how listings are aggregated and the rules of Zillow and Realtor.com and others.
So Matt, it's a soft pivot from, in my view, although he throws in AI and voice and text commands and that kind of thing, and CMA scheduling, lead generation, I think he's shifting the narrative. But we spoke last week about the power of the behemoth versus the power of the local brand. And Steve Baird made news and did not hold back, I feel, talking about the um, the, the owner-driven brokerage and locally owned direction of a company as opposed to the ivory tower guiding and directing how these independent group of realtors should behave. Let's hear the highlights of that.
Great setup, and yes, so we talked last week, and we're going to touch upon some things here, the smaller brokerage versus the national Compasses, Caldwell Bankers, et cetera. And so Steve Baird had a nice little article that was out this week, I think, in Real Estate News,
Okay.
where he talks about a lot of the things that we talked about last week, which includes his perspective on brokerage competition as well as leadership in real estate. And some of the highlights that Steve Baird talked about is consistency over hype. You know, he's the CEO of Baird Warner here in Chicago, and he says long-term consistency and stability, not aggressive growth, are the key drivers to surviving in a market, which I think is true.
Well, I will say, if you've been around since 1855, you can make a claim like that, right?
Exactly. You know, another point that Steve brings up is leadership matters the most. You know, success comes from having leaders that are fully vested and owner-driven, not just capable managers. You know, so people who are invested in the local real estate community, the company, they're going to drive harder and work harder and be more dedicated to who they're serving. So it makes sense. You brought up the history. Baird Warner's a 170-year-old company this year, family-owned still, and is ranked as always one of the top brokerages here in Chicago and one of the top 40 each year nationwide. Past rivals are now non-factors. National brands like Remax, Caldwell Banker, and Berkshire Hathaway once tried to dominate Chicago, but lost traction due to weak local leadership. As we've, I think, stated many times, you know, you come in here, a national franchise comes in here, and they're trying to cherry pick and get into this market. And how do you get that? You buy.
Yep.
You take over teams.
Write out big checks.
But you're still not part of the using Chicago as the local market area. You're not local.
Yeah.
You're beholden to Robert Reffkin in San Francisco.
And people are making decisions based on what they've seen nationally as opposed to the nuances of the local market.
Right. Another point that's brought up in this article, skeptical of Compass's rise. So Compass is always front and center, so everybody's going to talk about them. Following Compass's acquisition of App Properties, Baird acknowledged the firm's new dominance, but questions how long it will last under corporate ownership.
And he gives a shot across the bow to the ad folks, Matt. He gave a shout out and said they did a great job. And those two guys are local, that started at, but then he says
they sold out.
The founder sold out.
They sold out, which is true.
Yeah.
They did sell out.
Yeah.
And they, Michael and Thad, are going to say, no, we're still going to be here. But at some point, they're going to check out.
Yeah.
I would hope they check out. They got a big check coming their way. And
check out. Emphasis on check.
Exactly. Steve also pushes back on private listings. So Baird and Warner and Steve Baird have taken a position, and they disagree 100% with Compass's narrative that exclusive listings, in calling their consumer choice argument BS, and points out that the Chicago MLS already supports private listings, which it does. Focus on service. Baird is not chasing market share for its own sake. His focus is on personalized service and says the big corporate players cannot match that in the local market, which I think we would agree with.
Local over corporate.
And then local over corporate, which we are saying corporations treat everybody the same while the local firms offer a tailored experience and they're more grounded, understanding of the local nuances. 100% true. So
that's great.
I don't know if you have a perspective, but we're all waiting for it.
You know, Matt, what I would say is there's benefits to being corporate owned and big and having maybe economies of scale and those kind of things. And I think that everyone has had an experience with a Caldwell agent, a Keller agent, a Remax agent, and said, it's been great for me. And that's because to the degree that they're able to establish themselves locally, with their personal brand or whatever it is. So this is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just for us to provide some perspective.
And for those of you that want to learn more about Steve Baird, Steve had a wonderful one-on-one interview with Steve Baird the end of last year.
Yeah, very powerful.
One of the best interviews and discussions I've heard with a real estate leader in years.
Yes.
So if you have not seen it or heard it,
Check
check
it
it
out.
out. I forget the episode number, not that we need it. You could just search
Google,
and you will find it because it's a big hitter and a lot, thousands of people have definitely watched it. So check that out.
Matt, something that caught my eye yesterday.
Yes.
Multi-generational housing hits all-time high. Give us the details about that.
So multi-generational housing, grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, kids, maybe even grandkids are now living together more than ever. This was the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Did you live in a multi-generational house at any time in your lifetime?
I did.
You did?
Yeah, we lived as a young family. We lived with my mother's parents for a little while.
I personally did not, but we had family members that did.
Mm-hmm.
Two flats, three flats. One family lived in one, the other family lived in the
That's
other.
right.
They cycled out, someone else moved in. So this is
Matt, I'll tell you a quick story. My grandfather and my father's dad, they lived as a family of 10 on Chicago on Claremont in the bottom, and then the upstairs was reserved for the one who married. They got to move upstairs, stay there for a little bit, get out, and he just kept moving them up and out, up and out.
so multi-generational.
Multi-generational
is not anything new.
Right.
It's nothing radical. And I guarantee if they had statistics back in the day, this percentage would probably be even higher. But multi-generational home purchases have reached an all-time high, and that's driven by obviously economic pressures and changing family dynamics. Us Gen Xers, so Gen Xers are leading the trend, accounting for the largest share of homes bought for multi-generational living.
So, Matt, if you're a real estate agent, it's something to think about. Who's mom? Who's dad? How? Some people might say, I can't afford. Maybe you can kind of tailor yourself to present the benefits of having multi-generational housing and lean into that. That could be a way that you brand yourself.
Right. And so multi-generational housing, as we talked about, grandparents, parents, siblings, other family members. And, housing costs are expensive, and families have combined resources to get a place to live.
Yes.
So, yes, from a business perspective, it's definitely something to look at when 2, 3 flats, multi-units come into play, because I see it firsthand. People are doing that.
Yes.
And I see actually younger investors doing it with their families where they 2 or 3 flat, they live in the one, rent the other 2 out, help pay it, and then they're buying it, keeping that property, and then buying another one.
Yes.
Creating that
Building and
multi-generational
growing.
opportunity.
Matt, so we made a claim last Market Trends that the proponents or the ones that the captains of the ship of the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit, they started their own brokerage, or they provided an offering with low commission, a fee, flat fee type of thing for buyers and buyers agents. That was true. They did in September of 2024 start a company called Landian. So it's interesting that these folks that got involved in the lawsuit and all that have now kind of pivoted to this. I don't know how they're doing. We'll check and report back on that. But that's interesting. Also, one last thing, Matt, anecdotally, I see home prices going down in our market. And I don't know if it's happening in your market.
So I think I've mentioned this in an episode or two before. The houses that are priced appropriately are selling 1 to 2 weeks.
Yep.
Those that are incorrectly overpriced have been sitting there.
Yes.
Inventory seems to have leveled off somewhat, and I'm saying I live on the far northwest side of the city of Chicago, so I see it. But yeah, the inventory is not where it used to be. There seems to be an increase in listings, but yes, I think home prices are starting to level out.
Okay.
And people need to understand that.
And we reported in the beginning of the year that the best time to buy or sell a home was sometime in April.
Yeah.
And the date has moved. to
Yeah.
July 13th now. So I don't know, maybe it's just everyone keep moving the goalposts, but let's see. We will look forward to seeing you next week on next week's edition of Market Trends.
Have a good one.
Signing off.
Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are proudly sponsored by Land Trust Title Services. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'd love it if you'd share our podcast with your friends. Thanks a lot.